Hi, my name is Massey Burke, and I'm the co-director of the California Straw Building Association. I'd like to welcome you to the online CASBA 2020 conference series, which we are creating in place of our normal in-person conference this year. We'll be covering a wide range of topics as usual, from fire to code to hands-on practical experience.
David Arkin is a principal at Arkin Tilt Architects and also co-directs the California Straw Building Association, both in Berkeley, and Michele Landegger is president of BOA Constructor Green Building and Design, soon to be known as Modern Refuge in Santa Cruz. So let's start with you, Michele. What have been some of your personal experiences of the California wildfires over the last couple of years?
My personal experience with wildfires is Debray, my partner Debray, and I have homesteaded and lived at the top of the Summit Mountains for the last 24 years. We've lived through 3 major fires through that area, 2 of them that burned across our property. Those fires were very informing. I became a member of our volunteer firefighting force as well. And then just in August, this last August, Santa Cruz County suffered the CZU lightning complex fire. That fire is exceedingly devastating, loss of 800 homes. And that fire in particular, and then fire behavior over the last 3 years, I think has really changed. I'm no fire expert. I'm a builder. I'm a general contractor. I'm a builder. I understand WUI, the wildland interface, urban interface code, etc. I've never noted how important it is until these last few years, because fire behavior has changed, because our fuel is drier due to climate change, perhaps other factors as well. So their fires are now creating their own climate. The last part of my personal experience was in Bonnie Doon, where we have a current remodel happening. We're a design build company. We're on a project that another architect had designed, and we went over the WUI codes and implemented all of them in this home. That home was in an area of a development of 60 homes in the Braymore area, and of those 60 homes, 15 survived, and 15, most of them were near the entrance of the development. The home that we're remodeling was at the outlying area of the development, overlooking a big precipice that overlooks the San Lorenzo Valley, super high fire danger spot. And that home was the only home of any of the homes in that area that survived at all. And it was astounding that it did, and very sad that so many others lost their homes.
Michele, I'm so sorry about your feelings of loss for your neighbors and friends who have lost properties. David, similar experiences for you. You're in Northern California.
I'm recalling that my first experience of California wildfire was in 2015 with the Valley Fire in Lake County, and being able to see the plume of smoke from Marin County as we were driving north on 101, and it looking like a thunderhead or a cumulonimbus cloud, and realizing that this is huge. So in response to the loss of the Valley Fire, which I will note, there were both straw bale and cob buildings that survived that fire. Our neighboring structures were lost, and CASBA, the California Straw Building Association, wrote about that in that first 2015 fire. In response to that, my firm, Arkin Tilt Architects, made some of the home plans that we've developed over the years for straw bale homes available to fire survivors. And at least 2 homes were built based on those plans subsequent to that fire. However, in 2017, we experienced the Tubbs Fire and other Northern California fires, which were devastating not only to hundreds, if not thousands of people, but also my wife and I and her family own property collectively up in Sonoma County, and our land burned as a part of that fire. Gratefully, the houses that are on that parcel survived, but we lost a barn and a yurt and water infrastructure and other buildings. Ironically, we were up in Oregon teaching a straw bale workshop in the rain during that, which was very odd. But so we have experienced it firsthand and empathize with everyone who has had these losses. So we continue to work with folks who lost homes in those fires. We have a fire rebuild under construction in Santa Rosa right now. We also had one of our clients up in Redding as part of the Carr fire. Once again, their straw bale home survived, where nearly all of neighboring structures were lost. And they credit that in part due to the design and siting of their home, but also the fact that they had done clearing for defensible space. They had a very lush, well irrigated landscape immediately available, adjacent to their home. And just good luck. The fire came from the north, and we had sited their home on the south side of a hill, and I believe it just literally went up and over most of their project. But definitely have experienced a lot of success with buildings that employ fire-safe techniques, and honestly, straw bale walls is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that. I can't wait.
Michele, do you want to go into the Braemore site and why that did survive the wildfire?
So the Braemore project, as I mentioned, was a home of one of 60 in a development. Some were overlooking a cliff, and some were just kind of in flat, developed area. And the 210 Braemore survived. It was the only one on the cliffside that survived. Of any of the homes anywhere around. Any home in sight, I couldn't see any home in sight that survived. And I believe that it benefited from the WUI compliance measures that we took, plus we did extra stuff for fire prevention. A metal roof, standing seam metal roof, with a Versa Shield fiberglass reinforced underlayment that is intended to bump a roof class rating up to an A class, and that was an elective measure. It wasn't something we needed to do. Our roofer actually showed up with the wrong stuff, and we made him take it off and put that on. And the architect had designed that home with metal eaves only, which I've noted that that's a technique that Arkin Tilt employs often, where the eaves are just the roof metal coming out. And what I saw when I went up there relevant to that particular design was the roof had embers on it. Undoubtedly, fire had burned on that roof. Fire had burned on the eaves as well, because you could see on the underside of that metal roof, it was a different color. It was discolored from the fire. Fire had burned in the gutters of that roof. So I think that just having the metal on the underside really helped save it. I think that the gaff Versa Shield underlayment saved it, as well as we did all the regular things such as ignition resistant hardy panel siding, an ignition resistant WUI certified cedar siding by NUSCU that is a composite cedar that survived. There was burn right up to the house. There's a redwood tree, in very close proximity to the house, and that's where the roof embers, that's where you could see the discoloration on the roof. So there was a redwood tree burning next to the house, and it didn't ignite due to, I think, the hardy panel, stucco on the first floor, on the first story, no crawl space venting, no attic venting, and we had substituted wood posts on the deck. The deck was a second-story deck over a concrete patio. You could see, when I went there, you could see fire stain marks on the patio under the deck. And you could see on the roof that the gutters had char marks in them. So there was definitely something burning in the gutters. We should have cleaned the gutters. We did not do that, but that's 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 number one. A fire's coming, clean your gutters. Or I don't think we had our leaf guard on there yet, which is one of the compliance measures we plan to employ on that house. We were 3 weeks from completing the house. So we were almost done there. On the deck that I was mentioning, the second story deck, we had substituted wood posts with steel columns. And then the deck we upgraded from redwood, which you could use a 2x6 redwood. We had upgraded that to a new SCU product that's a hardwood product. And I was amazed that the deck did not ignite. We did find some of the decking in front of the home that had burned. It burned right up to the house. My trailer got fire trashed. I had my dump trailer there. It's fire trashed. The new SCU was, the leftover decking was stored next to it. That you could see the charred remains of it. So it does burn when under high duress. But this house managed to escape that. So I think those measures are what saved it. And what I started to say at the beginning was that a firefighter could have shown up and helped out. Don't know. Supposedly they did not. Supposedly they had left that area to go.
And do you know much about the neighboring homes that unfortunately didn't survive the wildfires, and if they had similar resistance measures or were built similarly?
I don't think they did. I think a lot of them were built in the 70s and 80s and were typical T111 siding. I didn't know, there were no surviving homes in the neighborhood. Some looked like they were kind of wood shingled. Some had asphalt roofs. There were none other in the area that had metal roofs. Something to analyze.
We know from the Tubbs fire and other Northern California fires that the wind especially was blowing large clouds of embers against buildings, and anywhere that those embers could take hold against, small tinder, dry material, whether it was in a gutter, whether it was sitting on a shingle roof, whether it was blown through the vents in a crawl space.
That's what I've seen.
That tinder, dry crawl space. There were so many opportunities for fires to start. And I think the real key of these survival tales is that they largely tried to eliminate those opportunities. As Michele said, a metal roof with a VersaShield barrier that brings its fire rating up to a Class A. We use largely heavy timber, which for the wildland urban interface code is a 4x or larger exposed exterior framing member. We had a client up in the Nevada City foothills area that put a 40-foot circle of gravel around their cabin there. And I thought, that is just the ugliest thing I've ever seen.
A moat.
Defensible space that makes a big difference. If you're going to have an off-grid remote structure, give it a chance to survive a fire. And that was a big part of it.
What instance do you want to bring up, David? I know you have several yourself.
Sure. I think the most exciting tale to tell is that of one of our clients up in Redwood Valley in Mendocino County that experienced firsthand the fire. He knew that he should get out and pulled up the driveway where his driveway meets the neighbor's driveway and had this decision to make. Do I go check on the neighbor or do I get out? Luckily, the neighbor pulled around the corner at that very moment. And so it's like, okay, let's get out. And they turn and his pump shed is on fire, more or less blocking the driveway. So their only choice is to go back down to his straw bale home and ride out the fire inside the home. So from there, overnight, they watched the fire burn his power building and all of the neighboring structures, and pretty much right up to the building. But it did not burn, and they survived that fire. And in that case, it was a metal roof. It was a wraparound porch. It was unvented eaves. The ventilation for the attic was actually above the porch. So very carefully thinking about where you ventilate. And when you do ventilate, actually, I think the product to use is what's known as a Vulcan vent, which will close if it's exposed to high heat and fire. So all of those things led to their having survived that particular fire. We had another example near Sonoma where the fire burned up to the building, and in fact, little drainage pockets, which had filled with leaves, again, burst into flames and actually discolored the plaster siding on the straw bale walls of that home, but it did not burn. Another example in Lovell Valley, which is Napa County, the fire burned a wood pile sitting right up against a straw bale wall. It was stacked right, on the wall, and once again you can see the discoloration, but remarkably the building did not burn. In that case, there were windows that were very deeply recessed, and I think that particular detail in a straw bale wall is one that provides additional defensible space in that things on the inside of the home aren't exposed to the radiant heat of the flames against the glass.
Well, I saw that in photos of the home that you're describing, David, and I noted that as well. I think that probably helped that home too. And one thing that I forgot to mention in terms of the WUI compliance measures that were taken on the Braymore project was tempered glass. And that's a requirement. And we were not required to do that on the adjacent garage, which was connected to the home via a breezeway. But we decided to replace them and do so with tempered glass. And I think that also saved the building. Where I had mentioned that redwood tree that was burning next to the building on that gable end where there was embers on the roof, discoloration showing that there had been fire on the roof. One gable window, it's a kind of mid-century modern home, and it's got a gable end with rake windows, triangular windows on the gable end. And one of those upper windows burned, I think from the radiant, or broke, I think from the radiant heat from the redwood tree that was right there. And that was the only window that broke.
I wonder if we should define what some of these fire classes mean.
Just to know that in a wildland urban interface, a Class A roof is required, and many composition shingle roofs meet that, certainly clay or ceramic tile roofs, and a metal roof, as Michele described, with a Versa shield or some other underlayment can also qualify for that. I think a real key that should be noted is that if your shingle roof is piled high with pine needles and pine cones and other things, it is no longer a flame resistant roof. It is a tinder roof waiting to be ignited.
It doesn't matter what class rating it has, right?
To leaf guards on gutters and everything else, actually having a clean roof is key. And honestly, it's much easier to keep a metal roof clean than many of these others. So that is our go-to. It has a long, durable life, and it's going to give you a better chance of surviving these fires. It is not without a carbon footprint, and that is something we are cognizant of. But neither are asphalt shingles that need to be replaced on a frequent basis and other things.
You mentioned crawl spaces. Do they act sort of like a chimney and draw the smoke through and under the house?
Yeah, and the crawl space acts as a suction, as a convection suction vent. It acts chimney. Thank you. The rocket stove girl would know.
It's useful for some places.
Right. And it's a rocket. You get a little rocket stove going under your house. So, well, you can have an unvented crawl space. You don't have to build on a slab on grade, and straw bale does not have to be slab on grade either. And you can have a mechanically vented crawl space. Or again, you can use the Vulcan vents that David mentioned that are designed to close. And if it's just for homeowners that are in this position now that need to take measures when they know a fire's coming or whatnot, you can cover your vents. You can put sheet metal on them. You can put aluminum foil on them. You can do the same on your windows should they not be tempered. And those are measures that people can take if they cannot afford to change their homes as well.
Removing the draperies, so they're
exactly. Yeah, removing everything back from the wall.
Yeah,
because the radiant.
I grew up in the Midwest where we have frost depths that are several feet into the ground, and so we have basements. And I'm a big believer that if you're going to have space underneath the house, make it usable in some way, and then condition it. And if it's conditioned, it doesn't have those vents to the exterior. It's actually part of the building envelope. And even if it's just a crawl space, you can still do a conditioned crawl space and not have those foundation vents.
And a place to store your canned beets.
It is an expense to build a basement, but you can mechanically vent a crawl space as well. Starting from there, not having vented crawl spaces, which I had never really seen the importance of that until the last few years. Just it's really apparent to me that it acts as a chimney, like you said. And then next measures, going from ground up, you could do steel studs, etc. You could do straw bale. Straw bale is extremely fire resistant because it's densely packed cellulose that's covered by a plaster, some sort of plaster, whether it be earth, lime, cement lime, etc. So having a wall system that does not act as a chimney the way a studs wall system can and will. And then, David, you want to take next step?
Well, I was going to say that, just avoiding having combustible materials close to the ground, because often one does have landscaping, around the perimeter of one's house. And if that does catch fire, if there is a flammable material close by, it will likely catch fire. And once that happens, it's too late. So bringing that concrete foundation or some other cementitious non-combustible material up to, say, the windowsill height instead of just 8 inches above grade can help make a big difference. One straw bale building that we lost in, I think it was the Atlas fire in Napa, was a one-room straw bale studio, and it caught fire when the one wall that wasn't straw bale but had wood close to the ground caught fire, and then burned up that wall, the entire roof structure, and then down into the straw bale.
And in that case, what could you have done differently?
Simply use the fiber cement material that might have made a difference. Just something non-combustible.
What about roofs, David? Are there venting issues with roofs similar to crawl spaces?
Yeah, I think, there are options for roofs, and they should always be designed with the specific climate that one is building in mind. And an unvented roof can be a high performance roof without question. And obviously, if you don't have venting, that's going to, be a large step in the right direction. As I mentioned earlier, the Vulcan vent is a honeycomb structure covered with intumescent paint that closes when it's exposed to high heat. And I think if you're living in a very, warm, hot place where getting the heat out of the roof structure before it has a chance to migrate down through the insulation is going to help keep you comfortable all of the other times of the year when there isn't a wildfire threatening your home, then that's a good thing to include in the design of your house. But do it thoughtfully in terms of where these vents are placed. As I mentioned earlier, in one example, we put the vent into the roof above the porch. So there was less chance of embers ever reaching it. But using the vent that prevents, wildfire from entering is another good measure.
Yeah, as David mentioned, there is there's products for ventilation that if this is the roof, and let's say this is the roof and this is the end of the roof, the venting starts up here, not under here, that can go into the vent space. And I haven't found a product yet that I can use on metal roofs that will do that, but I use it on shingle, asphalt comp roofs often. Mm-hmm. And David, you probably know products that'll do that.
We end up having a step in the roof.
I love that. I love that look too. I noted that you had that on your Marin project that I looked at, and I didn't realize it was for fires. That's excellent. Another thing to consider too is unvented roofs. Often we achieve an unvented roof by using a closed cell spray foam insulation. And that's one of the things we really want to get away from using from an environmental perspective. So coming up with other viable strategies that any average builder can start to think about using when thinking about WUI compliance, and not just automatically using closed cell spray foam as a go-to for it. So I think that's an important vernacular we want to establish going forward.
When we're doing unvented roofs these days, we're using largely cork. Thermocork is one brand of a type of cork insulation. Mm-hmm. Also, wood fiber board. Gutex is the brand name of that from 475. So there are alternatives to foam that are more plant-based and carbon storing that can be part of a high performance and building code and comfort compliant.
Great. Yeah. David, can I ask you a cork question in relation to fire?
Sure.
I've done a building where we wrapped it with cork in the city of Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used that stuff. Yeah, we used it, and it was pretty friable. But would you consider cork to be fire resistant, or would it need dense glass underneath it, etc.?
Interesting question. I know that it's fire resistant. Whether or not a building department would still require, some type of fire resistant layer, I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I just don't know.
Seemed like a simple step to take.
It'd be great to be a substitute for it.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Yeah.
Were you using it as an exterior finish or just as an insulation layer, or both?
I think he was utilizing it as both. I think he got like R3 out of it or something, or R2, R1, or I don't remember what it was, but I think it was about 1.25 inches thick. But it was for a siding material, just as an innovative measure in a passive house. It was a passive house remodel.
Okay. Yeah. But thin, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Half inch, still fragile.
Yeah, we found it to be friable and kind of fragile. The cat came up and clawed it, and people leaning their bikes on it. So I would think about doing some kind of exterior screen over it, perhaps on the lower 4 feet, but then that would defeat any fire purpose if it was in the wildland urban interface.
Maybe not, depending on what you had to cover it with. But
yeah.
That's interesting feedback. We've only been considering using it as a rigid insulation with some other flat.
And it wouldn't need to be vented the way standard rigid is vented?
Well, rigid can be part of a unvented buildup. Mm-hmm. So that's what it's substituting for foam board, polyester or polyurethane.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to jump back into any of those details, David?
Sure. Well, Michele mentioned one of our favorite details, which is if you're using a metal roof, to just let the underside of that metal be the finish, and then you only have the heavier timber structure that's left exposed, which is inherently fire resistant. But if you have an enclosed eave of some sort, to think about what that material is, be it a fiber cement or, I think the most fire resistant detail we've seen is bringing the stucco right up and underneath, the soffit all the way out to the eave. You had asked a question earlier, Leslie, about what information is still lacking or what we might want to see going forward. This is a personal, wish, maybe as a co-director of the California Straw Building Association, but a better understanding of why these straw bale walls have performed so well, both in testing and in real life. And, I think it takes some study that we look forward to doing.
Great. And people are encouraged to submit their own experiences as well.
Oh, we'd love to hear it. CASBA wrote a report of case studies, and we'll be continuing to speak to survival stories, hopefully, for as many people as possible, both straw bale and non-straw bale homes. I think we need to learn from all the technologies that have made a difference for people's lives.
One thing that we haven't mentioned is straw bale retrofit.
Mm.
And that might be a viable solution for a lot of homeowners that are in the wildland urban interface area and are very concerned about fire. And if they're wanting to improve their roof system anyhow, think about adding a straw bale wall system on the exterior perimeter of the home, and then rebuilding the roof, or prior, then building the roof large enough to accommodate that.
And in doing so, wrapping your home with an R30 value, thermal resistance insulation, you are going to be much cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter, and give that home a much better chance of surviving a wildfire. That is an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity for CASBA workshops as well.
We're always looking for workshop opportunities, and as we like to say in CASBA, it ain't rocket science.
It is building science.
It is building science. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, it is building.
I would like to thank Michele for participating in this conversation, and Leslie for hosting us. I think it is so important that we get the word out on what fire-safe building can be, should be, and that there are these natural building systems that can contribute to one's fire resilience. That should get more attention. So, thank you.
David, are you offering home designs for fire victims currently?
Thank you for asking. Yes, we still are. We've developed a catalog of about 10 or 12 modest straw bale home designs, and we make those available for free to fire victims, and our engineering partners will support that with the engineering specific to their projects.
Such a value. Great.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you both. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, David. Great to see you guys.
I'll give my standard COVID, I'm not worthy.
Folks, everybody stay safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands. We'll see you next time. And ride a bike. You've been watching the premiere episode of the California Straw Building Association 2020 online conference series. Please see the show notes for links to resources and to get in touch with CASBA with your stories. Theme music is by Tim Walker of Bowfunk. I've been your MC and video producer, Leslie Jackson. Thanks for watching.